Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell, welcoming you to today's episode of CAIR on Air. Thank you so much for joining us. A special thank you to our listeners on American Muslim 360. As you all know, over the past week, so much of our work and so much of our conversations on this program have revolved around the situation in Palestine. Most recently, the latest escalation of violence began when the Israeli government started attempting to expel Palestinian families from the neighborhoods in Sheikh Jarrah. Then the Israeli government started attacking worshipers and protesters at Masjid al-Aqsa during Ramadan, the holiest time of the year for Muslims and one of the holiest sites in the Islamic world. Then, as we all know, Hamas started firing rockets into Israel in response to that, and the Israeli government launched a massive bombing campaign of Gaza. As we speak now, over 200 Palestinians have been killed, including at least 60 Palestinian children, to say nothing of the numerous buildings and homes and medical facilities that have been destroyed, and also 12 people in Israel have been killed as well. So this has been a horrific crisis that Benjamin Netanyahu has escalated and fought for. And to make things more frustrating, as you all know, our own government here in the United States has failed to condemn this violence and has really delayed efforts to publicly bring it to an end. We just now, literally in the past few minutes, got some breaking news. Hopefully some positive news. We're going to discuss that momentarily with our special guest for today's program. That guest is Brother Nihad Awad, their National Executive Director of CAIR. We're going to bring him on now. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nihad. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Good. Alhamdulillah. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for joining us, Jazakallah Khair. And I know we're all very busy dealing with this and other work that we do, and so we appreciate you making time for us. So Nihad, as you know, we're going to talk about, inshallah, broadly, the work, the change that CAIR has seen in the United States on the discussion of human rights over the past 27 years, right? When you first started, co-founded CAIR in 1994, right? How have things changed when it comes to the discussion of American policy and human rights, especially related to Palestine? We want to talk about that. But first, we want to get into the news that we just heard. So we've just seen a report from the Jerusalem Post that the Israeli government security cabinet has voted to approve a ceasefire. We don't know much beyond that. We don't know if the firing is actually stopped. Time will tell, but it appears that we are seeing movement towards a cessation of the active shooting war that is going on. Now, what else is part of this deal? Will the Israeli government stop attacking worshipers at Masjid al-Aqsa? Will the attempts to expel people from Sheikh Jarrah come to an end? Will the blockade of Gaza end? We don't know any other details except that apparently there's movement towards a ceasefire. So, Brother Nihad, let me get your reaction to this potential news and to President Biden's very late in the game support for a ceasefire. Just give us your reaction to the breaking news, and we'll get into the broader subject, inshallah.
Well, thank you very much, my brother Edward, and assalamu alaikum to our viewers who are watching this very important episode about what's going on in Palestine. The Israeli assault on civilian populations in Gaza has been going on for decades, has intensified with air bombardment and artillery bombardment for the past 11 days, non-stop, probably as we speak. Almost Israel did not find any more places to target. They destroyed a lot of the infrastructure of Gaza, the roads, housing buildings, non-profit organizations, 17 hospitals, and as you said, more than 240 people have been killed. 1/3 of them are children and women. 63 or 65, actually, 65 children and 39 women. I have the number here. More than maybe 1,500 people have been injured, and 14,000 people in many places have been affected by this. Thousands of houses have been completely destroyed, and thousands others have been damaged. So life has been more unbearable due to this bombardment and indiscriminate targeting of civilian infrastructure and civilian populations by Israel. And it is really a reflection of its apartheid, indiscriminate disregard of human lives of the Palestinians. Now, I'm happy to hear that the resistance by the Palestinians and the pressure from around the world have mounted on Israel to realize that it's losing at home, because the bloodshed that Israel is causing is shaking the conscience of people everywhere, including among American Jews who we see even in the United States started to express their not only dissatisfaction but their horror over what they see Israel doing to the Palestinians. And the second point is, while we see that the tone by President Biden has escalated between him and Benjamin Netanyahu, but really this is belied by the fact that he signed a sales deal to send $735 million worth of missiles similar to the ones that Israel has been using to kill and maim and destroy Palestinians in Gaza. So while we see that there is an improvement in the tone, it is too late. It is too late by this administration, who has been complicit. I said it a few times, and I will say it now. There is no way that Israel could harm the Palestinians without using American-supplied weapons. Benjamin Netanyahu will never dare to attack Palestinians unless he knows 100% that America and American power are behind him, and that he has a tacit and explicit support. And we have seen that so many people, so many countries try to pass a UN security resolution to stop the war on Gaza or the slaughter against Gaza. And the United States more than 3 times blocked it. So this administration, like many others, are totally hypocritical. You cannot claim that you are against war crimes if you are not against war crimes against all people. So this administration is no different than other administrations. We have to hold their feet to the fire. And I know that the mounting pressure on this administration eventually worked. It should have been done, and this administration should have escalated its tone 11 days ago, and should not have blocked the UN Security Council resolutions, and should not have allowed the sales of more arms to supply Israel to kill more people. So definitely we also see new voices in Congress that we are honored to see, that these people have the courage, like Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Representative McCollum, and Pukan, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Cory Bush, and other people. These are fresh voices that give us hope, but it is not enough, because there is now a legislation in Congress that you and I and everyone should call our members of Congress to make sure that they vote for it, and shame those who did not vote for it. So there's a lot to say and there's a lot to observe, but there's a lot also to do on our behalf.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just the breaking it into the immediate violence is only part of the issue, right? There's still the broader issue of ending American support for the occupation and oppression of the Palestinian people, and ending American support for other human rights violations that are happening around the world. So, Brother Nihad, you touched on a very important point, which is the real significant change in the dialogue about Palestine, right, the pressure on the Biden administration was not only coming from, your usual activists and the Palestinian people, it was coming from Congress, and that's a unique change. So we've got a video we're going to play here that just kind of summarizes what we've seen in the past few weeks of that change in the tide turning on how we discuss Palestinian human rights in this country. So let's pull that video up and play that for our viewers, and then afterwards, inshallah, we can get into a more detailed discussion about what happens next, including the bill that's up for consideration.
No one should suffer the loss of life, liberty, or dignity that the Palestinian people have suffered under the Netanyahu and previous administrations in Israel during the 50-year occupation.
To read the statements from President Biden, Secretary Blinken, General Austin, and leaders of both parties, you'd hardly know Palestinians existed at all.
So I must ask, when we defend Israeli citizens' right to peace and security, how can we at the same time ignore the 5 million Palestinians living under occupation?
The unrestricted, unconditioned $3.8 billion in annual U.S. military aid it gives a green light to Israel's occupation of Palestine.
Palestinians are being told the same thing as Black folks in America. There is no acceptable form of resistance.
And the United States must acknowledge its role in the injustice and human rights violations of Palestinians. This is not about both sides.
I remember learning that the same equipment that they used to brutalize us is the same equipment that we send to the Israeli military to police and brutalize.
For too long, America has looked the other way as Israel has engaged in this horrific campaign against Palestinians.
Yet Israel's disproportionate response to Hamas's attacks, destroying entire buildings and public spaces, is exacerbating this horrible cycle of violence.
Several Muslim advocacy groups boycotting the event to protest the White House's support for Israel.
The only leader in the world that we believe that can stop this is President Biden.
Like Israelis, Palestinians also have a right to exist and to defend themselves. But there is no one willing to help them do that. Not the Israeli courts and not the U.S. government.
Members of Congress, for example, who are speaking out, who are publicly, vehemently condemning the human rights violations that the Israeli government is perpetrating against Palestinians.
Well, the American Muslim community was absolutely shocked at the scenes and the footage of this violent attack on Palestinian worshipers and protesters at the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
No more money for Israel's crime! No more money for Israel's crime! Not another nickel!
And in light of the shameful, cowardly statements from the Biden administration justifying the murder of Palestinians, we say no.
The Council on American Islamic Relations is leading a pretty large protest, calling on the Biden administration to condemn and oppose these airstrikes.
The Muslim advocacy group, the Council on American Islamic Relations, tweeted earlier that we cannot in good conscience celebrate Eid with the Biden administration while it literally aids, abets, and justifies the Israeli apartheid government's indiscriminate bombing of innocent men, women, and children in Gaza.
Thank you. So that's just a taste of what we've been seeing over the past few weeks, the change and how, we hear about and discuss the plight of the Palestinian people in the media and in politics, and also on the street. I mean, these massive protests all around the country. So, Nihad, just give me a reaction to, to what we've seen, the sea change we've seen happening. It's not a complete change, right? There's still entrenched support for the occupation in the media and politics and elsewhere. But can you say confidently that you have seen a change? And then also tell us a bit about, let's start the conversation about what it was like when you first started doing the work of CAIR here in America, right? That comparison between now and back then, and that transition we've seen over the past 20-something years.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that we were able to show some of those statements in Congress with our community and those who are watching, to know that your activism, your voices, your contributions, your voting are working. And these courageous members of Congress, they know that there are people in their constituents, in their districts like you, who care about justice for the Palestinians as we care about justice for all. So they feel confident that when they profess these positions, that the pro-Israel groups and the Christian Zionist evangelicals are going to put pressure on them. In fact, I spoke to some members of Congress in the past few days, and they said they have been attacked by pro-Israel organizations, that they have been threatened. And now, like for example, Ilhan Omar, she's been targeted by AIPAC. So the community has to know that this change that we started to witness is the result of a collective effort and will, that we are not going to be silent, and we're not going to allow others to do a blockade and monopoly on the information and reality of Palestine. And that's, to your question, Edward. I see a shift in the tide. It's really turning, but it is slowly. It is moving in the right direction. And yeah, when we started our work, we have been the target of many Islamophobes and pro-Israel organizations, because we wanted to see justice for the Palestinians as well as justice for the Kashmiris and other people. But the biggest taboo in the United States was to humanize the Palestinian victims, because that will erode the pro-Israel narratives in the United States, and that will loosen their grip over the decision-making process among many politicians in both parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. But luckily, within the Democratic Party, because there's no much religious dogmatic ideologies that's driving the party, it allowed for other voices, African Americans, Latinos, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, and other backgrounds, to start to express and speak their what they know about issues they care about. And secondly, when we started this work, all the information that we were allowed to see about Palestine was from CBS, Fox News, even CNN, ABC, and they all almost agreed that there should be one way to report on the issue of Palestine, which is from the Israeli perspective. And they will not dare to show Palestinians as human beings, or show Palestinians as the victims, or Israel as the occupier. So to see from then until now, with the help of B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization, and for example, the recent report from Human Rights Watch declaring Israel an apartheid state, that it's using violence against Palestinians because they are not Jews, and to have dual political and legal system, one for Jews and one for non-Jews, mainly Christian Palestinians and Muslim Palestinians, even against Black Jews in proper, what they call proper Israel. They have been discriminated because of their skin color, even if they are Jews. So this apartheid system, I think it just became evident that no one can ignore. The second factor is, though the mainstream media had monopoly over the talking points from the pro-Israel organizations, but with the flow of information, with the internet, there have been more flow of free information, and people started to do their own research. I myself, in the past few days, I have been seeing new faces, new voices from the American public, from the Jewish community, really becoming more vocal and holding our government accountable to its complicity by arming, supporting, aiding, and abetting the state of Israel in oppressing the Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but throughout Palestine for the past 70 years. So the narrative is shifting, is changing, and that's really due to the steadfastness of the Palestinian people, by the way. Israel could not break them because the Palestinians know that they are on the right side of justice and history. And no amount of human power, no amount of military crushing power will really crush their will to live and defend themselves and maintain their culture and hold onto their lands. So that really reverberated around the world. As you can see, people in Gaza, there are 2 million people living in one of the most highly concentrated and densely populated areas in the world. So in other words, if you throw a stone on Gaza, you will injure or kill someone. And Israel has been just shooting in a barrel, basically. No shot that Israel hits on Gaza without killing or injuring or destroying something. So they know that, all of this did not really break the Gazans. And they showed the world that, with all the mighty, sophisticated US weapons that America supplied to Israel, they could not, and inshallah will never break the will of the people of Gaza and Palestine. So that really shook the conscience of many people here. And you can see now the social movement around Black Lives Matter, about immigration policies with the Palestinians, and pro-Palestinian movements started really to work together and echo that justice is indivisible. You cannot promote justice at home, and that's for the politicians and progressives, without being universalist and pay attention to our impact on the lives of people like in Gaza, in Sheikh Jarrah, in Jerusalem, and throughout the region. So this is like a culmination, but the tide has not turned, Edward, completely. This is just the beginning, and the hardest work is still ahead of us. So there's a lot to say in terms of what we can do. So, for example, one important thing, and I really would like the community, those who are watching, if you have a pen or if you have a phone, get this number. The video showed you. Call the White House. It takes you 2 minutes or 3 minutes on the comment line. Call 202-456-1111. The number is very easy, by the way. 202 is area code of Washington, D.C. 456 is, sequence number. Then 1111. That's the White House number. You should memorize it. You should call the White House and ask President Biden not to send more arms to the state of Israel, because the ceasefire will not just remove the oppression, it will stop the bombardment. But apartheid is still over there. Gaza is under blockade. People cannot live the life you and I are enjoying here or around the world. They are captive. They live in a prison. These are families, young people who would like to have a future like you and me. They cannot do that because they are under blockade for the past 14 years by Israel, supported by the United States. So the oppression is not over. If you really care about Palestine, call the White House. Secondly, all of us are represented by members of Congress, by 2 senators and a U.S. House of Representatives or congressman on behalf of your district. I'll share this number with you. If you really love Palestine, you don't have to be 100% English speaking. You can express yourself like myself. English is my 3rd language, but that should not prevent me from calling my elected representative and ask them to support any bill that supports Palestinians. So if you do not know the name of your elected representative, it's very easy. Call the congressional switchboard. That's like the central, it's like a phone company there for the Congress. Call 202-224 3121. I will repeat, 202-224-3121. They will ask you a question. Who do you want to speak with? You give them your zip code, where you live, and they will give you the name and number of your elected representative. So don't give them your statement there. These are like, people who will give you the information, like it's the information for the Congress. So don't put your energy there. Just get the information and call your representative. You will not speak to the representative himself or herself, but you can leave a message on their comment line or anyone who answers, and just state your name, where you live, and say, this person represents me, and I would like him or her to vote yes to halt U.S. aid to Israel. This is the minimum you can do. If you cannot do it today, do it tomorrow. Urge other people to do it. I know that you and I are willing and able to go to the streets in front of the Israeli embassy, in front of the White House, in front of the Congress. I know that you and I nationwide are willing to march. You will spend hours marching in the streets, but spend 5 minutes. Spend 5 minutes, and you can call your elected representative. In other words, we have to work smarter, not harder. And the issue of Palestine deserves that we speak to the policy makers and lawmakers. Why I'm saying that? You're not in London. You're not in France. You're not in Germany. You're not even in Gaza. You are in the United States. Without the United States support, Israel will not be able to oppress the Palestinians. And the only ones who can change that is people in Congress, because they approve the budget and the military aid to Israel. If you want to prevent Gazans from being bombed and maimed and killed and destroyed, if you want Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood to stay Palestinian and not to be ethnically cleansed and depopulated, if you want Al-Aqsa Mosque and other places to be protected from being desecrated and invaded by Israeli soldiers, you can do it by taking 5 minutes to call your member of Congress and say, enough is enough. Where do you support the Palestinians? So that's really the most effective way for us, or among the effective ways for us to express our views, because our lawmakers are hearing abundantly from the other side, but they hardly hear from us. They see us marching in the street, but not many people call them or write to them or meet with them. And that's the difference between us and the other pro-Israel supporters. And we have to close that gap. Once we catch up with this, you will see that these politicians, they will respect you and they will reflect your views. But right now, they are taking advantage of your and my silence and not contacting them.
So Nihad, alhamdulillah, you covered both of the issues, which was the past and also what's next. So thank you for that. And inshallah, the producer is really putting some of that information in the comments section. And you can also go to CAIR's website. We've got petitions there you can sign, the phone numbers that you need to make these calls. You can also please check out American Muslims for Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace. They also have petitions and initiatives you can use to spread the word and spread it widely. Right now, as Brother Nihad mentioned, Senator Sanders in the Senate and Representative Ocasio-Cortez in the House have introduced a bill of disapproval for the planned sale of $735 million in precision-guided weapons to the Israeli government. Although, we expect that to go through because of the way the law works. They have a very limited time. The key thing is to fight as hard as you can, try to change the needle on this, move the needle, and maybe you can convince the administration to pause the sale and give Congress time to review it. So make sure you're doing that, signing those petitions, making those calls, inshallah. And then the last thing we didn't get to address, and we're out of time, but I think it's evident, why does CAIR care about this issue? This is a human rights issue. It's an American issue because of our government's support for it. It's a Muslim issue because of the Islamophobia perpetrated by the Israeli government and the fact that so many Palestinians are Muslim, and Masjid al-Aqsa is one of the holiest sites in Islam, as is Jerusalem. And by the way, as an African-American, I'll say this is also a black issue. Nihad mentioned the solidarity that we've seen between black activists and Palestinian activists. That's because we recognize the obvious similarities between what is being perpetrated against Palestinians and what was perpetrated against Black people in the Jim Crow South and against Black people in South Africa and in so many other places around the world. So no matter what lens you approach this issue from, a secular human rights perspective, Muslim perspective, a Black perspective, an American perspective, it's something that we all have to care about. And not just this, but so many other issues happening around our country and around the world. So we thank everyone who has made their voices heard over the past 11 days. It really has made a difference. If it were not for the people protesting in the streets, making the phone calls, signing the petitions, sharing on social media, Allah knows best. This violence could have been going on for another week or even longer. The 2014 Gaza war lasted, I can't remember, Nihad, but I think it was at least a month, if not longer, and 2,000 Palestinians.
And 1,400 people were killed.
Yeah.
But also today, about 107,000 people have been made homeless and displaced in Gaza.
Yeah. And 11 short days of this violence. So, Hamza, this has been a horrible situation, but something positive has come out of it, which is we have rallied our community and people around the world in support of human rights. We have changed the discourse on this issue. And I think we put everyone on notice that business as usual is not going to work anymore, that Palestinian lives matter, and that we're going to keep saying that, and that we're not fighting just for an end to this violence, but an end to the oppression, occupation of the Palestinian people, and an end to oppression around the world, whether it's against the Uyghurs, Rohingya Muslims, or people of other faiths and backgrounds who are being targeted around the world. So the struggle continues, inshallah, but today we take some solace that it looks like the violence we've been seeing will come to an end. Brother Nihad, thank you so much for joining us. Jazakallah khair, and we'll talk to you soon, inshallah. And thank you for watching today's episode of CAIR on Air. Again, if you want to call, but please call Congress, call your legislator, call the White House to get that info from our website or the comment section, and make sure you're making those calls. And inshallah, we'll keep the community updated on this issue. We'll see you next week for the next episode of CAIR on Air, Tuesday at 3 o'clock, inshallah. Until then, assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.